Bonjour, bonjour à toutes, bonjour à tous. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on harnessing AI for economic growth, organized by the European Union Delegation in Canada with the cooperation of Canada's Information and Communications Technology Council. This is the second webinar we are organizing on AI, and today we want to explore with you how AI adoption, which is the process of integrating artificial intelligence into organizations' operation, can drive economic growth. And most importantly, how the European Union and Canada can cooperate to help their citizens, their businesses, reap the benefits of AI. I know it will not be possible, of course, to give a comprehensive reply to these questions in 1 hour and a half, but I'm certain that the speakers from the public administration and stakeholders of the European Union and Canada will come up with some very interesting proposals. So allow me to recall something very important, that the idea to organize such a webinar dedicated to AI adoption was proposed by civil society. It was the result of vibrant discussions at the Forum on AI, Democracy and Human Rights, Digital Rights, organized by our EU hub in Ontario last April in Toronto. And Canadian stakeholders told us loud and clear that they all know, of course, the benefits of AI: increased productivity, accelerated scientific discovery, and enhancing delivery of public services. But they also know that we still need to make steps to achieve seamless adoption of AI. And what is essential for responsible AI adoption is to build the guarantees to ensure citizens' trust. Trust is everything. Ladies and gentlemen, the European Union and Canada face similar challenges: slower adoption of AI by SMEs, the need of upskilling the workforce, or building adequate computing infrastructure. The good news is that both the European Union and Canada have strong advantages. First, robust and perfectly aligned AI strategies, like our EU AI Continent Action Plan and Canada's recently adopted AI for All. Second, we both have vibrant ecosystems of research institutes, universities, companies, and startups driving innovation across sectors, from healthcare to energy to robotics and defense. As you remember, probably the European Union and Canada have signed last December in Montreal, on the margin of the Digital Partnership Council, a very ambitious MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, on AI, from research and regulatory cooperation to AI adoption and infrastructure. The MOU covers important synergies to enable Canada and the EU share the global narrative on AI. Let me thank today all the speakers and the teams, and especially my team, that have prepared this important webinar. I'm looking forward to the discussion, and I wish you all a fruitful and informative session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador, for that introduction to this very important discussion that we're having here today. Good morning or good afternoon to all of the folks who are joining us today, depending on where you're located. My name is Ann Patterson, and I'm the Chief Research and Communications Officer at the Information and Communications Technology Council, or ICTC. I will be your MC and your guide through our conversation today. So before we begin, I do want to acknowledge the lands on which we live, work, and gather. Many of us are joining today from Turtle Island, which is the land colonized as North America, including the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples who have cared for these lands since time immemorial. Others are joining us from Europe and elsewhere in the world, from lands with their own histories, peoples, and relationships to place. As we gather together today in this digital space, we do invite each of you to reflect on the lands that you are joining from, the Indigenous peoples and communities connected to those lands, and our shared responsibility to acknowledge the truths of the past, repair relationships, and move forward with respect and care. Today's session is being recorded, and the presentation will be shared in a follow-up email to everyone who has registered. We do have two portions of today's conversation. First, a fireside chat, and then a panel discussion followed by a Q&A. So we invite you to think about your questions as we go through today, so you can put them into the Q&A feature during that portion. So to get us started, I'm very pleased to introduce the speakers who will participate in our fireside chat today. Our fireside chat theme is From AI Ambition to Implementation. I'm going to introduce and welcome our speakers. I will ask each of you to turn on your cameras as I introduce you, and then we'll have you all on screen. So first, please join me in welcoming Gosia Nikovska, Head of Artificial Intelligence, Innovation, and Policy Coordination Unit at the European Commission, Directorate General for Communications Networks, Content and Technology, or DG Connect, who is joining us from Brussels today. Please also join me in welcoming Catherine Burke, who is Director General for the AI Secretariat at Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, or ICET, who is joining us from Ottawa. And please welcome Namir Anani, President and CEO of ICTC, who will moderate our fireside chat and who is also joining us from Ottawa. I look forward to listening in on this discussion, and so I will turn it over to Namir to take us forward through.
Wonderful. Thank you, Anne. Good morning, everyone. And thank you to Ambassador Toots for these thoughtful remarks and for framing the discussion and this important discussion today. It is a privilege to welcome everyone here today to discuss a subject of interest to all of us, and that is how do we move AI from ambitions to implementation. Bonjour à toutes et tous, je suis vraiment ravi de vous retrouver aujourd'hui et de vous souhaiter la bienvenue à cette discussion pour explorer une question essentielle, c'est-à-dire comment réaliser ou concrétiser les ambitions de l'intelligence artificielle, surtout à un moment où l'intelligence artificielle transforme nos économies, nos sociétés à un rythme sans précédent. Une réflexion qui n'a jamais été aussi importante. To set this discussion, or briefly set this context for this discussion, I think it's fair to say that in the last decade, artificial intelligence has evolved from a promising research frontier to a foundational technology that's transforming our economy, industry, and society altogether. But the question remains is not how fast, how this technology will transform our world, but how quickly, how broadly, and how responsibly this transformation will take place. So both Canada and the European Commission or the European Union have been pioneers in the AI journey, as Ambassador Toots mentioned earlier, with very renowned research or world-renowned research, very known global institutions, and a vibrant innovation ecosystem. But also that we have a shared commitment to make sure that advanced technologies is serving people, society, and the economy going forward. But the question always remains, how do we adapt this technology going forward for all our benefits, ultimately? But not only how to adapt it, what are the sovereign capabilities of this technology that we need to protect, and under what governance mechanism that should be taking place? So the adoption, how do we move it from the research agenda, from the laboratories to construction, to manufacturing, to hospitals, to farms, and others? So today we have a rare opportunity to dialogue with subject matter experts from both the European Commission, Małgorzata Nikovska, and as well as from Canada, from ICET, Catherine Burke. So I'm delighted to welcome both of the speakers to this discussion today. And maybe we'll start with you, Małgorzata, with an opening question. In fact, I've been reading recently the Apply AI strategy that the European Commission has set out. And it's interesting to set the stage. Can you describe how the European Commission views this approach to AI adoption, and what lessons learned has the European Commission got or drawn from the implementation of this strategy with some of the key sectors, whether it's manufacturing, health, or energy, or others? So, all to you, Margareta.
Thank you very much. First of all, good morning and good afternoon for those people who are on this side of the ocean. Thank you for having me here today, and it's wonderful to participate in this very important discussion in this context. Indeed, the European Commission has set a fairly ambitious agenda in terms of artificial intelligence. We started with a strategy in April last year called AI Continent Action Plan, and that strategy set the building blocks for the uptake and the development of AI in Europe. It had 5 key pillars: data, skills, uptake, regulatory simplification, but most importantly, compute. Which, as we know, is a key element for successful development of AI. This was the strategy that put in place our AI factories and gigafactories, which are simply compute infrastructure, to which now also our most advanced SMEs and startups have facilitated access. So this was the starting point, but that was clearly not enough. To look at uptake, we proposed indeed in October last year, Apply AI strategy. And with that strategy, we suggested the AI first approach. This approach is not to say that AI is the solution to everything, far from it, but this approach encourages our companies and public sector organizations, when they face some kind of transformational choice, to consider AI first. The objective is not that all companies now use chatbots, but that they redesign their processes, those which really add value with AI in mind, and that might be a significant change and not just a top-up to existing structures. That, in addition, was done in a sectoral focus. So we have chosen 11 key sectors, including public sector, those sectors where Europe already has strong industrial base, and this includes the sectors you mentioned: manufacturing, agriculture, healthcare, energy, but also defense and security, and also culture and creative sector, which is also very important for our economy. We carried out a sectoral dialogue with stakeholders from those sectors, where we really focused on innovation and what obstacles they face in taking up AI. And as a result of this, we came up with a number of actions that are now being put into place. Generally speaking, without going into sectoral details, we looked at providing sectoral models that would be trained on sector-specific data, to which there would be facilitated access. We also considered indeed the access to data, which is in possession of the companies, to fine-tune those models. And we focused on the promotion and awareness raising about existing solutions beyond those that are kind of obviously available on the market. And we are very happy with the implementation as it goes so far. We have carried out already most of the call for proposals that we wanted to launch for all these activities. And we are now launching in a second phase of sectoral dialogues with the specific sector, with the companies in those sectors, to see whether they see any change on the ground as a result of our actions. So we are pretty happy with how Apply AI and its implementation is going.
Excellent. Thank you, Margareta, for this introduction. And it's very interesting to see also that the concept of the AI factories that you have put in place. I'm sure we'll come back to it in the discussion if time allows, because that sounds like a really promising ecosystem to help the small companies, at least the micro and SMEs, adopt technology. Maybe I'll shift now to Catherine from ICET. Welcome, Catherine, to the discussion today. So very similar point of view. So obviously with the AI for All strategy that's been released, and a welcome release in Canada, but we still see the adoption of AI is uneven across different sectors. So what are the government policies into enticing adoption into across the broad economy in Canada, and what would be the approaches that could help the SMEs take that adoption and take it to the next step to enhance their innovation factor, but also the competitiveness, not only on a national level, but an international level?
A very important question, and a challenging one, of course. So thank you for the question, and thank you for having me here today for the webinar. As my colleague has said, I think that the core thing that we need to focus on, and what you'll see in the AI strategy launched in early June by the Prime Minister, is trust. Trust is truly at the heart of adoption. And from the perspective of the strategy, you can see that is really central, in that it is one of the first of the 6 pillars, where we're talking about Canada's vision for the way artificial intelligence will be able to help transform Canada to be an AI nation. The title of the strategy, AI for All, really highlights why we think that trust needs to be at the core of it, in order for every Canadian to benefit from the opportunities that AI presents, both in their personal lives, professional lives, as employers and employees. The results of AI, the increased productivity, increased economic opportunities, needs to redound to all parts of Canada and all Canadians. That means everyone needs to have AI available to them, and they need to be able to understand how it can work and how to be an informed critical user of AI. So the strategy recognizes the enormous opportunities that the technology presents, but at the same time acknowledges the real concerns that the technology poses, such as job security, sustainability, privacy, and sovereignty concerns. So those will be central to our ongoing implementation of the strategy, because addressing those issues is how we can ensure that adoption is real, fast, and widespread. The opportunity and sovereignty concerns, once we are able to advance the commitments made and the strategy to address those issues, will ensure adoption creates the benefits for Canadians both now and in the future. So as I mentioned, there are 6 pillars. So when we talk about trust, as I mentioned, the government has committed in the strategy to protect Canadians and safeguard our democracy. That's under Pillar 1. We've also talked about building trusted international partnerships and global alliances to ensure consistent standards around how AI is developed and used, and that will also foster trust. To provide opportunity, the government has committed to empowering Canadians. You'll see that under Pillar 2, which is about ensuring that Canadians, no matter what part of the economy they work in, or what part of life they have, or where they live in the country, that they have an understanding and access to tools that will help them understand how to use AI. And also that we will ensure shared prosperity by providing access to AI skills and adoption tools. And that's, as I say, in Pillar 3. And then finally, to safeguard sovereignty, the government will help, 1, scale Canadian champions. We talk about that under Pillar 5, about making sure that there is a sovereign solution to AI issues and opportunities. And 2, to build a sovereign AI foundation here in Canada. And that's part of those AI champions that we have here in Canada, but it's also about doing things like having data centers here in Canada that are governed by Canadian laws. Overall, the strategy will inject nearly $200 billion into the economy by 2031, will fuel the creation of 250,000 jobs. and will provide almost 100,000 work placement opportunities for young Canadians. Our target for adoption is 60% of Canadian businesses by 2034, which we see as a very ambitious target, given currently we are at about 12%. And so that's not a long time to expand significantly the use of adoption across the Canadian economy. One of the ways that we see the adoption being fostered, as I said, is through increasing trust and at raising those adoption rates. And so there's tools like specific targeted adoption support funds, like the program we call LIFT, which is administered by the Business Development Bank of Canada, and the Regional Artificial Intelligence Initiative, which focuses through our regional development agencies to provide direct support to companies looking to adopt AI into their business models. There's also going to be that hands-on support that I referred to through the AI literacy and adoption tools. The literacy program is both targeted to every Canadian so that every single person can have access to learning opportunity, but also very employment-focused, skills-based learning provided through things like the Job Bank, which is already exists, or increasing elements of AI skills in existing job skill programs that exist in Canada. So the combination of these elements is really how we are going to raise the adoption rate, as I mentioned, from around 12%, which is where we are right now, to about 60% in just a few short years. I think that one of the things we recognize is that ambition is hopefully self-perpetuating. The more companies that use AI and see how it's relevant to their business, the faster the adoption rate will increase. So we've gone from about 6% 2 years ago to 12. Recent statistics are showing that in 2026, we're something more like 19%. And so we see that pace of adoption increasing. And that's one of the reasons we're feeling very positive that we will hit this ambitious adoption target by 2034.
Wonderful. Thank you, Catherine. This great explanation and highlighting the pillars that are important as well for the adoption. You mentioned there's economic policies, there are governance aspects, there is skills development as well. The focus also on literacy is very important. The youth agenda is excellent. To target and to develop that capability. Maybe we'll move into the sovereignty, because you mentioned, Catherine, a lot on the sovereignty aspect. And maybe I'll go to Gozia on this question and then come back to you on that. So, as Catherine mentioned, it's important, at least in Canada, that we leverage AI systems that we can trust, but under laws that we govern as well, ultimately to protect, national interests, but also economic interests and security, defense, and others capabilities, and intellectual property as well. How is Europe tackling the sovereignty question, and what approaches is the European Commission putting in place to do that? Because there are many there's the technology side, there is the governance side. So would love to hear from the European Commission in terms of your approaches on that.
Thank you. It was very interesting to hear how Catherine described the Canadian strategy, and I think we are actually very, very much aligned, even in terms of numbers, because only last year we were at 13%, and this year we are 20%, so very, very close, and really the jump is high, and I think this ambition is even too low. When we speak in 2034, I'm sure, Catherine, you will say, we should have aimed higher. We see a lot of enthusiasm among companies to take up, but here we indeed come across the sovereignty hurdle, because we don't want them to take up anything that comes across. We want them to also have a choice of the solutions that they are taking, and to be aware of how much is actually in our case being developed in Europe, and that can be deployed by European companies. So, of course, it is not about isolation. In current world, it is impossible to be completely self-sustainable in terms of anything, I believe, and technology even less. So we definitely need to work together and depend on each other. At the same time, it is important to reduce our critical dependencies and increase our resilience. And here we adopted 2 weeks ago, on the 3rd of June, Cloud and AI Development Act, and it really kind of hits the nail on the head in terms of digital sovereignty when it comes to AI and cloud, which is the preferred mode of delivering AI services to companies and to citizens. So, among other things, in the first place, it looks at our own capacities. It looks to foster homegrown innovation. It looks into investing into this technology, not only in terms of applications and uptake, but also we want Europe to remain at the frontier of the technology, understand how it operates, and remain in the game. But it also looks at the competitiveness of our key sectors, those digital ones, of course, in the first place, but also the traditional ones. And here we support the building of resilience and we look at the uptake. This is a key element. We feel that our companies, the more AI savvy they are, the more they understand the benefits of the technology and use it with their business processes, the better prepared they will be to compete in the global market. And last but not least, there is our regulatory strength, AI Act, but also Digital Market Act, Digital Services Act. Those regulations shape not only European regulatory landscape, but also have impact globally. Many countries are looking at how they are implemented and look also at to see what elements of those rules can be applicable on their home ground. And the key element, and I think very relevant in the context that we find ourselves now, is, of course, trusted partners. So we are very keen to continue the great collaboration with Canada, also to learn from each other, especially as we see that we are so aligned already. So I think the potential for lessons learned and sharing experiences is really great.
Thank you, Gosha. Yeah, it's. I think the sovereignty aspect is a very critical component that we're all reflecting on. It is a challenging one as well, and I'll go to Catherine on this question to see the approach in Canada, because sovereignty is many things. It's the technology, whether it's the data centers, the fiber networks in Canada, it's the edge cloud computing, but it's the governance approaches, it's managing the data, managing the aspect of how to also the components, energy sovereignty, the semiconductor aspect. So how is Canada tackling this, and how is the government's views on sovereignty, Catherine?
Truly, I think the easiest way to answer that would be to say what Gosha said. Genuinely, we are so closely aligned. It is clear, not just in our adoption rates, but also in the approaches that we are taking to sovereignty when we think about this digital technology and the concerns that we have when it comes to this technology. As Gosha said, you cannot have isolation. You cannot use almost any digital technology in isolation. And our Prime Minister likes to say that sovereignty is not solitude. It doesn't mean that we are trying to do something alone. That is not only not functional, but it is not pragmatic when we look at our global economy and our desire for Canadian companies to be global champions in a number of different AI verticals. So we have to think about how to be sovereign and how to be autonomous while also being deeply integrated with the market and with our allies. And so in an AI era, we have to think about having the capacity to develop, deploy, and adapt the AI systems that we are using in Canada in line with shared values. And I did mention that previously as really a critical component of the strategy that we have. And so one of the ways that we're doing that is, first of all, through also having a legislation that speaks to how AI will be governed and how privacy and data use will be governed. In fact, we tabled here 2 new pieces of legislation just in the last week alone that modernizes the way that data is used in Canada and introduces also through something called the Safe Social Media Act, some of the different ways that AI could be governed. So those have just been introduced in Parliament, and we'll see how those move forward when Parliament returns in the fall, as the end of session is upon us. The other thing that we need to do from Canada's perspective is strengthening the access that our Canadian companies have to key enablers of AI use, including compute, data, and other forms of digital infrastructure, so that businesses and institutions are able to adopt AI at scale, safely and effectively, and while ensuring that the way that they're using that technology and the data that they are uploading to the systems that they're relying upon are going to be governed according to standards that are consistent with Canadian values. And so one of the ways we're doing that is by building that digital infrastructure here in Canada and advancing Canadian champions. We're very proud that Canada is one of only 4 countries that has a frontier model that has been developed here. And so that is one of the other ways that we're ensuring that we're able to ensure that a Canadian approach is available not only to our companies and users here in Canada, but also as a competitive product that can be used in other countries by within the global marketplace. I will finish by just saying that it is to reiterate that digital sovereignty is not about isolation. It is not about limiting collaboration. It is about building resilience and autonomy so that Canadian customers and users, as well as the Canadian government, have choices and the ability to manage their own data and their own use securely and safely. And so we are very happy to work together with partner countries and international allies like the European Union to ensure that there are consistent, appropriate standards that are used globally or adopted globally, as well as ensuring that Canada is able to maintain our control of our own critical technologies and our own critical data.
Excellent. Wonderful, Catherine. So I know that we have a very short time. We may have 5 to 7 minutes to explore the next question, which is one that is critical in terms of the governance and regulations and others. But would love to hear from Kosha, from your side, from the European Commission. So the AI Act in Europe is taking shape at the moment. And it's quite a prescriptive in its risk-based approach. How is that being adopted, and how do you do the balance between innovation and regulation? Because again, it's important to think about the play between the two, and how do you make sure that companies are able to adopt such regulations and able to innovate in that space?
Thank you for this question, and I'll refer back to Catherine, who spoke about trust quite extensively, especially in her first answer. And this is the answer also to the AI Act question. That's the underlying objective of the AI Act. We want our citizens to be secure, safe, with respecting our values, including human rights. And for that, we need certain rules to be put in place. As a result, our citizens will be able to trust this technology, especially in sensitive sectors like justice, for example, or education. We don't want, that anything happens there and there is complete freedom without any rules. Therefore, we have this risk-based approach, and I think this approach is actually well designed, considering the technology that is constantly changing and growing. We are not regulating any specific uses of AI or even AI itself. We are regulating when it touches these sensitive areas. There are certain uses that are directly prohibited, but for most of the cases, the rules depend on the severity, on the particular use where it will be deployed. And this is all with the aim of ensuring that our citizens can have trust in the technology, and also the way it was developed, what type of data was, for example, used. And that is one element, but what many people forget is that AI Act is not only about protecting citizens. It is also about innovation, and one of the key elements of that is our setting up of the sandboxes. Sandboxes will, in fact, enable companies, together with the regulators, to test their solutions to see how they respect the rules, what kind of provisions need to be put in place, but they will also be an opportunity for regulators to better understand the reality of the developers and maybe foresee some changes to the legislation. The legislation was also designed in such a way that there are certain elements of flexibility. As you might know, my colleagues are constantly developing further guidelines and codes of practice, for example, exactly for that reasons. This is done together with companies to be able to reflect also their needs and to understand better how the technology will work in practice. One additional element, we are not leaving our companies alone with this. We have a number of support measures, including an AI Act service desk where any company can call and ask their questions about implementation, and they will be provided with answers. We also have other support measures which really look a little bit more from the uptake perspective, so not only about the regulation itself, but also encouraging the uptake of the technology. So. Last point that I would like to make is that we recently had a poll done in Europe, and 80% of the citizens questioned in this poll supported regulation. So it is clear that our citizens don't want this technology to be completely left to its own devices, but they want some rules to be put in place. So all in all, I think we have really reached a good balance on this.
Perfect. Thank you, Kosha, for this explanation. And you're absolutely right. I think governance provides the trust and capabilities and protect our democratic rights. But at the same time, also regulatory clarity is important to help companies invest into this, because as the rules are clearer and you're providing sandboxes and so forth, so they can do experimentation without risk, ultimately, for a period of time or whatever, to develop that. Catherine, maybe you can expand on the approach, and I'm sure you're going to say very similar aspects to this. It sounds, I must admit, this is the first panel I've managed where there's so much synergies between the two aspects, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Catherine.
I'm delighted to hear about the synergies and very happy about it, in part because it means we will have the ability to learn so much from the experiences of our colleagues in the EU, particularly the results of the work with your sandboxes as you talk about them, and those changes or those challenges and obstacles that are experienced. I am very confident that they are not unique to the European, the EU, and therefore anything that you can learn from that, Canada will be able to benefit from, which is always exciting. I think the slight addition I would make, in addition to all of what we've already talked about trust, is to go further with what you're talking about, Namir, which is investment certainty and transparency. So I think when we're trying to find the balance, when we're talking about regulation that ensures trust and confidence in the system, at the same time, not stifling innovation. What that means is investors need to have certainty about what the requirements are going to be. And in In doing that, what we are focused on as part of the AI strategy is setting standards. And so there are some specific investments that we're making in creating standards with the Standards Council of Canada. We're also looking at specific certification and watermarking and other tools that we'll be able to use that will create certainty about what the requirements are going to be for AI companies and in the tools that they develop. And that will create certainty both for the users, as in the companies adopting AI tools. They will know what their limitations might be, and trust and certainty on the part of the ultimate user, individual citizens. So they will be able to trust the output or the products that SMEs are using AI to deliver. And so I think that is how we are ensuring that we're going to find that balance between creating a trusted ecosystem as well as an environment where innovation is rewarded, is through, as much as possible, certainty and clarity.
That's wonderful. Listen, very exciting to hear, very encouraging from both economies in terms of the way we are heading into this space, from creating the trust, but the economic aspects as well, and creating economic opportunities for both economies, for both nations. I know we're coming at the end of this discussion. I just want to thank both of you for a very insightful discussion. I'm sure we could have gone for another hour, an hour and a half to explore many aspects on this, but I'm very encouraged. I look forward to expanding this collaboration going forward. We both have, as economies, vested interest to, as pioneers in the AI journey, to take this journey further and on the podium internationally as well in this space. So thank you again, Koja, for this, and Catherine as well for the discussion, and wish you all the best. And I'll hand it back to Anne.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Namir, and thank you, Koja and Catherine. Really appreciate your insights on this topic. Really wonderful discussion. Now, we're pleased to introduce our panel discussion in the next stage of our webinar today. So now we're speaking about AI in practice, sectoral adoption, challenges, and opportunities in the EU and in Canada. Following the panel, as I mentioned at the start, there will be a few minutes for audience Q&A. So please do listen carefully and get ready to add your questions to the Q&A portion of the Zoom during the discussion. So I'd like to welcome our panelists. As before, if you can take yourself off video or put your video on, as I introduce you, that would be helpful. We'll start with Emmanuel Girardi, who is the president of the AI Data and Robotics Association, or ADRA, who is joining us today from Turin, Italy. I'd also like to introduce Alan Veerman, who's the Chief Operations and Finance Officer at the Vector Institute, who's joining us from Toronto today. I'd also like to welcome Ulrika Bargadali, who's the Executive Vice President of Public Policy at TechNation. Ulrika is joining us from Ottawa. And finally, Florian Schuck, who's joining us from Brussels. Florian is Policy Officer at the European Digital SME Alliance. And finally, we would like to welcome Rob Goring, who is the Executive Director of the AI Network of British Columbia, as well as the CEO of Wiser AI and the programs lead at the BC Tech Association. And Rob will be moderating the panel discussion and as well as facilitating the Q&A today. And Rob, I believe, is joining us from Vancouver. So Rob, over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Anne. And welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here for this very important conversation between Canada and the EU on AI adoption, competitiveness, and the future of our digital economies. As we've heard, the opportunity is now to turn the foundation we've all built together into practical outcomes, helping companies adopt AI, supporting SMEs, and improving access to computing, talent, building trust, smart regulation, and identifying where Canada and the EU can collaborate in ways that create real economic value. We have an amazing panel here today. We're very excited to have everyone together to talk through a number of very important topics. So with that, what I will do is we've got a number of interesting questions here. For the panelists, with question number one, I'll have each of you answer. I'll prompt you. But if you could, just introduce your organization in one or two lines and just let everyone know on the call today a bit about what your organization does to sort of set the stage. So Alan, we'll start with you. And question number one, we're really looking for the high value opportunities here. the Canada-EU Digital Partnership Council has identified healthcare, manufacturing, energy, and public services as shared priority sectors for accelerated AI adoption. So from everyone's perspective and vantage point, where is AI already demonstrating measurable productivity, competitiveness, gains in the sectors, and what conditions made that possible? And are there shared sectors within that list where bilateral opportunity between Canada and the EU remains largely untapped? If so, why? Again, Alan, we'll start with you.
Sure. So I'm answering from the perspective of the Vector Institute. We're one of 3 national AI institutes in Canada focused specifically on AI adoption and deployment and extracting value from the latest innovations and research. I think the sectors where we see AI demonstrating measurable productivity and competitiveness improvements are those sectors that had already invested significant time and energy into structuring their data. So we've all seen media and magazines articles that talk about data as the new oil. And in the Canadian context, those entities such as health, such as financial services that were federally regulated and had strict requirements on the organization and governance of their data were naturally best positioned to make early gains in competitiveness and improvements in AI. For example, in the Canadian context, the big 5 banks here are in the top 30 global financial institutions in the world, and there are 2 in the top 20. RBC is number 3 in the world in terms of its AI sophistication and capability. And that's not something that would be intuitive to a lot of other people in the global financial markets. And so the conditions that made that possible really talked about data governance and understanding of signals and an ability to see across production lines where there might be synergies in data. Similarly, in the manufacturing context, it was those industries that had already put significant time and energy into data analysis, statistical analysis, into sensing data, that they had a natural head start and advantage in getting ahead. So to the extent that there are sectors where there might be natural starting points for collaboration in a Canadian and EU context, I think it's those sectors that have made the largest gains in those areas.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Emanuela, over to you.
Yes, thank you. So I represent ADRA. I'm the president of ADRA. ADRA is the AI Data and Robotics Association and is the private partner of the European Commission in the public-private partnership in AI Data and Robotics. And we work at the intersection of industry, research, and policy, so with the European Commission and with member states. So coming to the question, I think I will just add to what Alan just said, because I agree with what he said. I think that the sector that they harness the highest opportunity today are the sector like for the financial sector or healthcare sector, the sector where they all had in common an abundance of data, so lots of data, big data, and also sector that were highly regulated, like financial services or healthcare. And they really started early, so not with generative AI, but much before they started developing AI project. So if I look at today at the European big companies in this sector, they already have a very high adoption of AI, especially, like previous AI, but also generative AI. Now they are also the one most advanced when it comes to agentic AI and orchestration of agents and so on. But if I look at the manufacturing sector, I think that probably, and looking also at the new frontier of AI that is coming up, the physical AI, so the convergence between AI and robotics, I think that this is probably the sector that will present the highest opportunity. Not today, but in the near future for sure. And this also represents, I think, a very good opportunity for Europe and Canada to work together, because today, if I think about the LLM or the multimodal, the LLM in any way, both Canada and Europe, we are more users than really producer or developer of this kind of AI. So we didn't really lose the AI race here, but we're not really the winner if we look globally. So I think that if we look at the next step, so physical AI, so world model, here is really an area where maybe we could cooperate and collaborate and really focus on developing the next frontier of technology, which for me is physical AI for manufacturing companies especially.
Wonderful, thank you. And Ulrich, interesting to hear about Technation and your perspective on this question as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, first of all, for having me here. So Technation is the leading information technology association of Canada, and we are also part of the Tech7 coalition and have proactively participated ever since its inception, and returned from France not too long ago to have these conversations. And we represent domestic and global companies of all sizes in the tech sector. So what I would like to do is actually focus on healthcare. And the reason is that my wonderful colleague, and I give her credit, Elaine Husing, has been leading these files for over 20 years. And she's provided some, I find, very impactful insights that I would like to share with you. So from a healthcare perspective, we feel at Technation that AI is already delivering a lot of measurable results. And one of the most immediate and visible examples of the use of AI-powered clinical scribes are available and have been often discussed as well. And they help with automation of documentation, reduce administrative burdens on physicians and nurses. And we know how important it is in healthcare to have time-saving measures to take care of patients. And it can be a crucial decision at times for the patients, of course. And in many jurisdictions, clinicians spend a significant portion of their time on administrative burden instead of taking care of patients. And AI is helping reclaim a lot of their time and improve workflows and patient care. And we are also seeing a lot of significant advances in diagnostics and clinical decision support, particularly in areas, and very importantly, of cancer screening, medical imaging, and just have to look at their early disease detection. And AI tools are helping clinicians identify patterns more quickly and more early, and in some cases improve also the accuracy and consistency rate. Now, beyond direct care, AI is also accelerating drug discovery, therapeutic development, and also health research. And there are, in summary, some enabling factors that really make AI adoption most successful. And first, and data was mentioned earlier, access to large, secure, and high-quality health data repositories is essential to these exercises. Second, organizations benefit from interoperable digital health systems and common data standards. I will actually speak about it a little later. Common frameworks, mutual frameworks, interoperability. And third, there must be clear governance and legislative frameworks that enable responsible use of health data while maintaining, very importantly, public trust and privacy protections. And I have a final point to make. And successful organizations have demonstrated also a willingness, they must demonstrate that willingness to rethink workflows and care models, and rather than simply layering AI onto existing processes. I would like, I know it's a little longer, but to finish off with saying, where are the untapped opportunities between Canada and the EU? And I have a couple to mention. That healthcare is actually one of the strongest areas for expanded Canada and EU collaboration. We both face as regions very similar challenges. We have aging populations, workforce challenges and shortages, rising healthcare costs, and a growing demand for digital services. And so there's a considerable opportunity for AI collaboration in the adoption field, digital health innovation, research partnerships, and a knowledge exchange, and particularly around successful solutions across the entire healthcare system. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks very much. And last but not least, Florian.
Thank you, Rob. That's definitely a tough suit to follow because I could not agree more with the things my colleagues have said in terms of the potential of AI for productivity gains and the potential in the EU-Canada collaboration. But I'll try to shed a light on the SME perspective. So I work for the European Digital SME Alliance. We are the largest association of IT SMEs in Europe, representing 45,000 companies across the continent. So our members are the providers of digitalization that is happening right now in all European countries. And from an SME perspective, AI is a tool that is very powerful, but it needs a bit of focus and an analysis to tap its potential. Since we have very similar economy structures actually in the EU and Canada. The EU economy is also very, very SME heavy, with 99% of the economy of companies being SMEs. So these are often hidden champions that have very, very specific domain expertise. And AI is something that can unlock the bottleneck that only these companies and a few other people maybe know. So if you utilize AI correctly, then this has huge potentials. Instead of listing the sectors that my colleagues have named already, I will look at the current numbers that just came in this week, because there's the state of the digital decade that the EU Commission just published, which tracks how many enterprises are using AI. So we have a target of 75% by 2030. I've heard a similar number by the Canadian colleague earlier. In 2025, this number was at 20%. So this shows that only 25% of the target have been achieved to date, and there's definitely room for more. Of course, the barriers we will discuss later on for companies, why they are not adopting AI. I just want to say that for me, and I will speak later about that as well, and for our organization, we have the conviction that it is not just about adopting technology, but it's about which technology we adopt and which jurisdictions are governing it. That is also important for the trust people have in AI and for the long-term resilience of an economy. So I think the EU and Canada have much to gain by collaborating closer on this issue.
Wonderful. Thank you, Florian. So that's great. Thank you, everyone. I think we're going to dive into a handful more questions here and kind of cover some of these topics. I'll ask ask the panelists along the way here. Do feel free to jump in if you've got commentary, of course. We'll move on to some of the adoption challenges. So the Digital Partnership Joint Statement explicitly flags awareness gaps, commercialization barriers, integration and deployment challenges, and access to compute as the key obstacles for AI adoption for SMEs, which, as Florian mentioned, is so critical to both jurisdictions. Which of these barriers is most acute, and are there specific initiatives from either the EU or Canada that you believe are working and could be scaled bilaterally? And Alan, maybe we'll start back off with you.
Sure. I think all of those are obviously challenges that businesses are looking at. But I think the one that is a game changer, say today versus 10 years ago, is access to compute. And the birth of the Vector Institute, we were formed in 2017. And at that time, top of the line consumer grade GPU was just under $2,000, and an enterprise version could still be gotten for under $10,000. The growth in AI compute and the demand that it's had on the supply chain for high bandwidth memory, for storage, for advanced AI compute chip, top of the line consumer grade GPU is now in excess of $5,000, and a top of the line enterprise grade version is approaching $50,000 USD. If that's not an example of a material change in access to capital for a company, I don't know what is. And even though we've worked with firms to examine the pros and cons on owning and setting up their own hardware for AI purposes versus purchasing tokens and credits in the cloud, it's just still a significant barrier that has been added to a business that is trying to make its way in the AI space. In contrast, I would say market access has always been an issue. It was an issue 100 years ago. It's going to be an issue 100 years from now. Finding the right talent, finding the right employees. That was an issue 100 years ago. It's an issue today. It'll be an issue 100 years from now. But the access to compute and the understanding and skill set required to accomplish that effectively is something that didn't exist on this level 10 years ago. And I think it's the skills requirements and the considerations in working effectively with compute, because there is a difference between working with compute and working with compute effectively and in a cost-effective way. I think that's going to get more complicated rather than simpler. And so that's just simply a new barrier. And the example that we'd give, so when we talk about access to compute, and I know it's intended as a question for later, but I think it just raises itself here, is this is why governments get involved. And the example that we gave was when we invented literacy, the government built schools. When we invented medicine, the governments built hospitals. When we invented cars, the governments built roads. That's where this sentiment comes from, that AI compute now needs to be thought of as infrastructure. And so that access to compute barrier at this level and at this scale, it's not to say that it didn't exist 10 years ago, but it just simply didn't exist at this magnitude at the level it does today. Right. And unfortunately, for the next little while, it appears that it's going to get worse, not better.
Yeah, the constraints are challenging, and we'll come back to compute for sure. Florian, maybe I'll come back to you because you obviously with your overview on SMEs with a huge network, what are your thoughts on this? Where do you think we could work together to scale adoption bilaterally?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to say that I fully agree with Alan. I think out of the barriers mentioned, compute and access to compute is the most acute. And I would go a step further and maybe modify the phrase and say access to sovereign compute is the most pressing issue, since the situation in Europe is now quite concentrated in the cloud market. So 70% of the European cloud market is controlled by 3 companies. So SMEs that want to use this capacity, maybe run their software, run the AI on some inference infrastructure, don't really have a choice, or they have a choice between the 3 same companies, which has a lot of risks given the current geopolitical situation. And I think Canada faces the same challenges, especially given that for a small company, building their own compute is near impossible because of the capital investment required. So I think there are a few initiatives that Canada and the EU can learn from each other. So what I really appreciate about the Canadian approach is, for instance, its focus on access to compute. So this the Compute Access Fund that was recently established with 300 million Canadian dollars is a real game changer, in my opinion, for the companies that desperately need this. And I think what Gosha already mentioned earlier is that the AI gigafactories will try to replicate this approach. There seems to be a bit of an uncertainty about how SMEs will gain access to this new infrastructure, but I'm optimistic that this will be a good way. And from the EU side, I think the concept of European digital innovation hubs is something that Canada could look at as a potential role model, especially in terms of the new Apply AI strategy. These hubs have been restructured as AI experience centers. So they are local centers of innovation where companies can turn to and look for advice or support on how to digitalize. And what I would underline as well here is that the strategy explicitly says that these hubs should aim at connecting SMEs looking to digitalize with European-made solutions. I don't want to, sound protectionist here, because I do think we should rather create a bigger market with like-minded partners, including countries like Canada. But I think that there's some strategic industrial policy needed in order to make sure that digitalization of the economy does not increase the dependencies that we are currently experiencing.
Absolutely. We'll move on to the next question, and next question will be, Ulrike and Emanuela, we'll come to you next. Talking about market access. So a lot of Canada-EU collaboration, has focused on policy alignment, research, and shared values, which are very fundamental foundational elements. But for companies, the real test is whether this can create customers, partnerships and revenue. So what can Canada and the EU do to make it easier for AI firms, in particular, again, SMEs, to sell into each other's markets, find these trusted partners, and really scale commercially across these borders? So Ulrich, we'll go to you first.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Great. I wanted to say I agree with everything that was said earlier on compute access and also the bilateral collaboration. Hopefully that will continue. Fantastic insights. Talking about bilateral collaboration, I mean, the Canada-EU partnership or digital partnership, that is already a strong foundation. And I think one of the next steps we often talk about is really reducing practical barriers, in particular for SMEs. That prevent companies from scaling in both markets. A first point would be to create some trusted cross-border market pathways. This actually aligns very closely also with the Tech 7, who had open calls and open conversations about interoperable digital ecosystems with trusted cross-border data flows. And then importantly, second, for government to be early adopters and being reference buyers early on. So imagine a Canadian company having a European, public sector organization as a customer and vice versa. It gives such a strong commercial platform and credibility. And I think the government as the first customer and early adopter would be another very important point. And then I believe as well, structured business-to-business matchmaking would be of great importance. If we could, Canada and the EU find businesses that have similarities or could work together on joint projects or integrate and utilize each other's projects and capabilities and expertise. And then lastly, also that SMEs in particular are equipped, because we both have SMEs economies, as also Florian just pointed out, equip SMEs with the skills and knowledge about the opportunities in trade agreements. Let's say CETA is a beautiful trade agreement and all the partnerships we've established and built, but a lot of SMEs I don't think are well aware or knowledgeable. They don't have big teams to understand these agreements at times. They're very complex. Yeah. So I think there is maybe a way to teach and have an opportunity for SMEs to gain a better understanding of what the possibilities are that are already existing and they're not aware of. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Emanuela, what are your thoughts?
Yes, can I just add something very quickly to what Florian said? Because sure. I'm not in Turin, I'm in Paris at Vivatech. And yesterday I was at a workshop with the director of the French AI factory. So in Europe at the moment we have 19 AI factories and 13 small AI factories antennas. So they're sort of virtual AI factory. So you have access to computers, so data services, then you have data lake, then you have talent. And what she said, especially for SMEs, is that the difficult part is that now that they have compute to provide, they don't have the customer. So they still don't know them. So also I think that to create awareness about what is available, because it was a huge investment, like about 20 billion together with the Gigafactory that are coming next year. So I think that this is also, to create awareness and to promote them, it's also important for SMEs. But going back to the question, I think that a great thing that has been presented a couple of months ago in Europe, it goes under the name of 28 regime or EU incorporation. I don't know if you all are familiar with this. It's the possibility for a founder of a startup to incorporate its startup in one of the 27 member states, and in 48 hours, which for Europe is really, super short time, it will be operational in all the 27 member states. So I think that looking at this, which should come to the market next year, probably a good opportunity would be to study something similar for like startup that could be incorporated in China and then access to European market and vice versa in a very quick way. Because I think that accessing the market, it's really difficult. There are lots of barriers, especially, from the policy point of view, from the bureaucratic point of view, and so on. So from the legal point of view. So if we can develop these new tools that are really facilitating the access to market for tech companies, tech startup, I think that it will be very useful.
Wonderful. I know we do want to get to the next question because it is the compute question, but Florian or Alan, did you have any other quick comments on market access? No? Okay, perfect. We'll move on to the next one. I will say, Manuel, I'm glad you brought this up. It is Viva Tech right now. I was there last year. Canada was a country of honor. I'm supporting our delegation remotely. And I will say that in our huge WhatsApp chat, there's a lot of really positive activity and business development deals being done and big open arms. So I think it's been a very good week for everyone over there on the Canadian perspective. So moving on to this very critical topic of compute and data, we've touched on a little bit. Sovereign AI compute capacity is a huge shared strategic priority under both Canada's new AI for All strategy and the EU Content Action Plan. Yet again, we've talked about this already a little bit. For most SMEs and mid-market firms, getting access to this affordable, reliable compute is very much a practical bottleneck. So ahead of this domestic data center development, many of which will take several years, how do we navigate this gap between national infrastructure ambitions and on-the-ground access? If you're an SME in a company and you need to deploy now and scale now, it is a hard thing to know. You need to wait a little bit as build-out occurs. So Florian, maybe we'll start with you on this one, and we'll go back to Alan and then maybe Manuela on this one.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. No, I think this is, as I said earlier, one of the most important challenges we need to tackle now. The fast and uncomplicated access to compute, and as Manuela just said, the AI factories are now providing this infrastructure on the European side. Now, I have not heard from my SMEs how the experience has been if they wanted to apply yet to these new AI factories. But there has been like a predecessor of this model, which was the Euro HPC for high performance computing. And there I have heard that the process is very inflexible and sometimes can take a long time because you apply, then you wait to be assigned an engineer, and then you need to maybe rewrite your code to fit the system. Mm-hmm. So this is not very practical for an SME or a scale up that for which speed is essential, and where you really need access to this compute early on. So I hope that with the AI factories and also with the AI gigafactories that are soon being starting to be deployed, we will not repeat this issue. I want to really stress one thing again, which is that I think in AI, and especially as all countries around the world are trying to race towards building the frontier AI models, it's very tempting to default to outsourcing this infrastructure to the dominant players on the market. Of course, as an SME association, we are biased, but I think we should keep the market open and ensure that there is a competition also in the compute market. So I think the Cloud and AI Development Act that Gosha mentioned earlier, which is now being negotiated, will help to turn things a little bit around. But I'm excited to see what exactly the consequences will be.
Rick, thanks. And Alan, you've shared some of your thoughts already on this, but curious to get your perspective on, again, this gap between current infrastructure and being able to actually scale.
Mm-hmm. So if you'd asked me the same question 1 year ago, Rob, we would have talked about the idea of doing what you can locally. But unfortunately, a lot of people have thought of that, and you've seen price increases in the consumer market. We would have talked about the idea of shopping around the different token and cloud credit providers looking for value for money on the best way to do this. I think one of the uncomfortable truths that we just have to face, that for the foreseeable future, access to compute is a strategic issue. Many countries, including Canada, including the European Union, are making investments in this area, but they're not doing so because they felt like it or just woke up one morning. They are doing so because it is an imperative. That access to compute presenting itself as a strategic vulnerability exists in a way today that it just didn't 5 years ago. And unfortunately, I might disappoint many people in the audience that for the next little while, for the foreseeable future, I think that's going to get worse, not better. I think the good news is that there are solutions on the horizon. I think players that advance heavily in optimization of their compute usage and energy efficiency in water cooling will have an opportunity to make themselves leaders in the space. I think there are business opportunities and consumer opportunities in who can do things most efficiently. But if you'd asked me this question 6 months ago, I would have pointed to DeepSeek as a market changer on the way in which access to compute changes the marketplace in a dramatic way. In the last week, the US federal government shutting off access to Anthropic's latest Fable model sent a shockwave, I would say, through the market on reliability in a way that just was simply not anticipated, because I think the signal that people got was, okay, so if they can do that to one company and one model, you can kind of do that everywhere. And so this is a capability that nations are now racing to build. It's been revealed as a strategic vulnerability. Places like the Vector Institute and our peer institutions had been noting this vulnerability as a while, but I will disappoint you in the audience, unfortunately, that I don't have some sort of magical solution that is going to make this better. And I think for the foreseeable future, let's call it at least the next year or so, I think it's going to get worse, not better.
Yeah. No, it's a very honest perspective, which we appreciate. We are getting close on time. Very quick on this particular question. Emmanuela, did you have any quick points you wanted to add? Then we'll move to sort of a very quick round fire.
Just very quickly from Vivatech. So yesterday I was talking to some robotics company that are building physical AI, and they were really saying that one of the major issue is access to computer in Europe. So this is probably the big challenge today. But I think that this is for tech companies or for robotics companies. But for the majority of SMEs, instead, it's not access to compute. I think it's really access to talents and access to data, because they really need to start not developing, but using AI or physical AI in their companies, and they don't have the right skills for this. So I think that it depends on who you're talking to. For a tech company, definitely is compute.
Absolutely. Great. And so we'll do it. We'll have one final question, and maybe we'll try and do this one very quickly. Ulrich, we'll come back to you. The really important thing here is, how do we actually drive pilots? So the digital partnership that we've established, policies for architecture for cooperation, but getting this into actual industry outcomes, bilaterally. It'd be very interesting to know, if you were to recommend one concrete bilateral pilot project, whether it's a joint sectoral testbed or a sandbox in regulatory compliance, what would that be, and what would success look like in 3 years? And again, just mindful of time, if we can all kind of answer quickly, but Ulrich, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you. I go back to my first example of in terms of healthcare. I do believe if there could be a Canada-EU health AI regulatory and interoperability sandbox. You talked about sectors of strength, and I think that would be a great possibility. To simply test out in a sandbox, which is a trusted environment, basically how the technology would work, and scale real-world AI solutions in a controlled environment. Because we need to keep it short, and you asked me what success would look like. So in a few years, I just think in how we would view it at Tech Nation, especially with this example, it would be that tangible outcomes, not just the sandbox. The sandbox is a good start, but multiple AI solutions basically successfully tested and deployed across participating Canadian and European healthcare providers, and a set of shared interoperability and also governance principles, and reduced regulatory and procurement barriers for both markets. And then lastly, and most importantly, really measurable improvements in healthcare delivery. So that would be it.
Wonderful. Thank you. And again, thank you very much. And very quickly, Florian, any quick thoughts on what success might look like?
Yes, I would say that really we should look at that we can define a number of companies, maybe even with a special SME goal that, let's say 30 SMEs that entered like a sandbox, also, as Ulrike said, validated their product, are now selling in both the EU and Canada, I think, and are making revenue on both sides. So I think this should be a good success model.
Wonderful. Emanuela, any thoughts?
Yes, so I think that this could be the catalyst, which is a project that was an initiative that was presented by ADRA, is end user driven innovation. So we put together a group of end user, for instance, in manufacturing. They identify what they need today in physical AI, and then we go backward in the pipeline of a value or of the innovation value chain, and we identify some solution that can really solve those problems. So maybe we can start with a group of Canadian and European manufacturers and identify some specific needs that they need to be solved, then solve them, scale them, and bring them to the market.
Wonderful. And Alan, last word on this before we move to a couple audience questions here.
I'm not sure that I have anything to add. Everyone gave terrific answers. I would note the emphasis or exclamation point. It was mentioned from Tech Nation, the idea that we need to have interoperable standards. And I think that's one thing that we need to not lose sight of when we give advice to governments talking about things in AI safety, AI regulation, AI trust, legislative definitions, regulatory definitions. We talk about the importance of international interoperability. So the advice we would give to a government is whatever definition you're going to use, whether it's a European Union definition, an OECD definition, the wrong answer is to come up with a definition that no one else in the world uses, because then it ensures that your jurisdiction is not compatible with the rest of the world. And in the AI space, I don't think that's sustainable.
And great point. And I think given our focus on SMEs, and this was brought up earlier, SMEs often don't have, armies of lawyers and compliance officers and things to keep on top of the various frameworks and compliance requirements. So interoperability, I think, Alan, that's a great point, because it has to be understandable in a bright line capacity. So you know if you're in or you're out, and you can actually, interoperate in the jurisdiction. So thank you all. Very, very quickly, we'll move to a couple of questions, the last kind of couple minutes here. There's a question, from a university in Ontario that is one of the planned high compute data centers. They're asking if you have any advice on how to lay the groundwork to ensure that they will be ready for possible EU collaboration opportunities springing out of, again, high compute capacity data center in Ontario. Any thoughts on that? It is very specific, so it's a tough one.
So maybe I just try to answer it. Maybe I think that there is a joint undertaking. It's called Euro HPC, so Euro High Performance Computing, that they're working on the Gigafactory. Maybe you can reach out to them, and they will probably support you in this. I can write in the chat. I can post in the chat the link.
Perfect, thanks. And then maybe another one here. We haven't actually touched on talent, which is a very important one. How do we actually ensure that public-private sector leaders are thinking about reskilling and upskilling at scale? That's very, very important across the two. So I'll open that up to whomever wants to address that.
I can say a few words. If I can quote again the State of the Digital Decade that was published this week, there we say that there have now been 10 million ICT specialists employed in the EU. The target is 20 million, again, by 2030. So again, here we are far away from the goal. And very interestingly, the report also notes that this gap cannot be closed just by reskilling and upskilling measures. So some deeper reforms are needed to improve the training of ICT specialists. But of course, it's not only about the specialists, but also about the basic digital skills, the AI literacy that the broader workforce has. And at risk of sounding like a broken record, also in skills can be a matter of sovereignty. When we look at the overdependence on education and training opportunities and offers by non-EU tech companies or most of them are US companies, of course. I think we need to be wary that we are looking to develop our own technology, but our workforce is not specialized or trained on working with this technology. So I think we should work towards having some kind of tech and vendor neutral training. And I think maybe this is also a potential area for EU-Canada collaboration in increasing this cooperation at university level, but also at company level.
Wonderful, thanks.
Can I add something?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, and we're right at time. So yes, Elric, jump in and we'll wrap
very quickly.
Yes, thank you.
I would like to expand it also and mention that K-12, we need to start early on with the education, right? And ensure that those literacy programs, whether AI or cyber and so forth, they're very interconnected, are being taught at an early stage and before actually people enter the workforce. So we are ready for that. And I think more needs to be done and can be done on that at that stage.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I want to thank our panel very, very much for your time and all of your wonderful answers. I'll turn this back. We're going back to Costas. So thank you guys very, very much. Appreciate it. And thank you to the audience.
Thank you, Rob. And I would like really to thank all of you for today's webinar. First of all, the Information and Communication Technology Council of Canada for their incredible help. The speakers from the public sector, from the EU and Canada, and all of you from the stakeholders. Thanks a lot, Rob, for the excellent moderation. Thanks a lot for the fantastic ideas from industry and stakeholders that we have heard. Now, of course, as policymakers, we have a lot to work on. But I would like to finish with one key message about the EU-Canada Digital Partnership. By intensifying research cooperation between the EU and Canada through our partnership in emerging technologies like AI, by advancing our regulatory cooperation and ensuring the interoperability of our standards, and by working together on secure and trusted infrastructure communications, we are creating, the EU and Canada, the framework conditions for the European and Canadian citizens, innovators and companies to thrive. The European Union and Canadian companies have the know-how. They can develop complementarities, build strategic synergies in areas that each side excels, and co-create trustworthy technology solutions based on our common values. That is what I call the EU-Canada tech offer that can be exported to the rest of the world. And with this, I would like to end today's webinar and to wish you all a nice rest of the day. Thank you all.